Jessenia, welcome back. Good to see you again. We're doing Quantum Live tomorrow. It'll be fun to have you speak, rock people's worlds. I had a number of questions come from our last podcast and just getting to know you and work with you over this last year and speaking with different people. So I'm going to queue you up for some questions. We'll go rapid fire and kind of see where it goes. We'll work backwards from not being so subtle. So you, as a skill set and as we would say, a spiritual technology, or I would say gift set, are able to access the Akashic record, which helps people how? How is that beneficial to humanity right now?
Well, we can all access our own Akashic records, but the Akashic records that are important now, I think, are more like outlining the political hemisphere goals that we're trying to pursue globally. Mm-hmm. And that's been an ongoing pattern. So I think that that's been really, really helpful to see where we're at and where we're going. But another interesting thing about that is a lot of people have a misconception that, you know, that records are somehow like written in stone or something. And we do have free will. And I have many times in this lifetime seen that plan collapse and then have to be remade over and over and over again, which I would say it's really interesting because I'm always like mourning a future nobody else ever knew about. And then it creates a lot of angst, as you know, because you're always like, you're so anxious. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's like we are functioning on a timeline, and that timeline is crumbling in front of us frequently.
So
I think people feel it. I think there's a collective fear that kind of surfaces in people where they start worrying about, you know, the future or politics or, you know, their lives, and then they get distracted again.
What do you think in terms of timelines, this idea that there are collapsing timelines or multiple dimensions expressing these outcomes and they're collapsing into one another?
Right. So when we write a plan in the Akashic realm, it takes thousands of souls, and we have specialists that come in, and we have, you know, war strategists, we have population strategists, we have people who work on illnesses and all these other things, and they all come together to create this master plan with one outcome, and the outcome really is to preserve Earth longer. And the reason for preserving Earth longer is because we get more out of it energetically. So Earth is kind of like a battery. So the goal is always to evolve more than we did last time and learn something new. And we just, so every time we, you know, blow up a planet or mess it up or default to our original pattern, you know, it's billions of years before we have a global reset. So this is not Earth's first go. But the way Spirit explained it to me was kind of like a balloon, that if you blow air into a balloon, you hit a max capacity, you deflate it, and then the next time you blow it up, it goes a little bit further and a little bit further. But if you put too much into it at once, you're just going to pop the balloon.
Yep. And so here we are again.
Right. So there's a whole process to planning that I think is really fascinating. And when we create this plan, it's so intense that it almost feels like a alternative reality. You know, you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it, you can kind of walk the roads of that plan. And it's how anything comes to fruition on Earth. We create a heavy set plan, and we kind of implement or download it. And then people start behaving according to the plan usually, but we have free will. So that's where it keeps getting messed up.
How does free will mess it up?
Well, Spirit said this really beautiful thing to me one day, because I love to argue with them. And I was frustrated, you know, when you're like seeing everything collapse and you get angry and you're like, why do we have so many mistakes? Why do people make so many mistakes? And they were saying that imagine we're in the Akashic realm and we're super intelligent and we're infinite beings and we're bored as hell and we make all these beautiful plans and we want to see everything go out. We think in our super genius selves that we've created every single possible outcome. And here's like Joe Schmo found a whole new way to fuck it up. They were like, it actually is one of the most beautiful parts of the human experience is that humans are teaching spirit. So a mistake is sometimes one of those most beautiful, like profound things we can offer, because that's expansion.
Yes.
Like you functioned outside of the plan and now we're all learning something new.
Yeah.
So now we're challenged to fix it.
So we could say then we learned through the process of infinite realities.
Right. So,
which is created by choice point.
So the plan can feel like an alternate reality. And we can sometimes enter that reality or view that reality or get lost in it, which is also dangerous because you don't want to be living in a reality that isn't necessarily, present.
Nobody ever does that.
But but it can collapse if we're not taking that particular road or making those particular decisions. We'll see it kind of crumble and then get reconsumed. So it's almost like a recycling of energy.
Okay, so for people who aren't familiar with your content, let's give them some working knowledge around words you're using. Describe what the Akashic field or the Akashic realm or the Akashic library is.
So Akashic Records, I think it's important to talk about, everybody thinks there's this like thing on social media that when you go to see your records, it's like a book. We use symbology to express something that humans understand, but we don't have like physical books in spirit. It doesn't make sense, right? We don't have energetic books. We can't put one lifetime in a book. It would be the biggest book you've ever saw in the whole world. And we have like 900 to 1,000 lives each. So in just this little blimp of time. So it would not make sense to put it in a book. But a lot of us visualize a book when we're doing something like therapy or past life regression because the mind, needs an image to like create a container. And a lot of people could not fathom the infinite reality of the actual library itself, which is in fact a very guarded, protected space where you can tap into these realities. It's actually really interesting. It's kind of like a cosmic map where you can zoom in and zoom out. And then you zooming in, you just kind of open up to more information. So you can get as specific as you want. It kind of reminds me of, if you need like a visual, it kind of looks like, Professor X sitting in his chair, like zoning in on,
Totally.
a place, a person, a
reference.
location, a thought, a moment. So that's how it works to pull up a specific thing. But it is incredibly guarded. And I think that's really important to understand too, because it is energy. So your energy will affect it, right? There's energy transfer. So we do not let everybody in the realm. It is highly protected, defended, and it is essentially the memory of creation itself. So if something goes wrong, if something goes corrupt, if something is damaged, we actually use the backup memory to repair it.
So, and from a quantum physics standpoint, we talk about quanta, that when we boil down matter, it basically just becomes information packets, right? Consciousness itself, which I think is overlaying with what you're saying there, that there is this blueprint that is protected that sustains this world, right? And so I love this concept. I think for a lot of people, they're probably like, what in the literal fuck? What are you guys talking about? When you say spirit, which you reference a lot, what do you mean? Give us other words for spirit.
It depends on what I'm reading and what I'm talking about. So if we're talking about like the Akashic Records, they're managed by the Guides of Akashiya. So that might be the spirit I'm talking about. If we're talking to someone about their dead mom, the spirit we might be talking to is literally their mom. So that would have a different name. Sometimes it's somebody's spirit guides. Sometimes it's somebody's higher self. So it depends what information we're accessing. It's just easier for me to say spirit, and I just refer to or defer to that, even though it's not good to say that because it's important to know who you're talking to. So
100%.
If someone asks me, I always know who I'm talking to. It's just a lot easier to be like spirit, right? Because sometimes it's a whole collection of a team. Like it's your higher self and 7-10 spirit guides, and they're all kind of giving us whatever information we need. So it's easier to just not be like, oh, this guy 2, guy 3, guy 5. It's easier to just say spirit.
So we could say then when you refer to spirit, you're simply referring to those who are conscious and disembodied.
Right.
And so there's a lot that falls under that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. I think hopefully that'll be helpful as we dive into this and understanding it. You said something for now my woo-woo peeps coming back for those who are on this side and get it. I love that you said this, and I totally agree. I'm going to make a statement here. Tell me what you think about it. Just because they're out of body does not mean they are all-knowing or wise or even accurate in the information that they're giving you.
Right.
What would you say to that?
So I work on I've worked on a lot of murder cases and missing persons cases and, hauntings and properties. Sold?
How many have you solved?
Oh, solved. I'd say everyone I've worked on, except for there's still 2 open cases. So everyone has kind of come in. People don't understand how slow the legal system is. It's so insane. You're picking stuff up and it takes years. And people are like, well, where's the answer? And I just can't believe how slow it is sometimes. It's just a major issue.
So you've worked with local police, detectives, FBI on solving murders and missing persons cases.
And what I've learned, which is really, really important, is that when a person, what I call a ghost is a soul that has severed from the physical body. The physical body is dead, and it's also severed from its higher self. So it's like wandering. So its higher self doesn't actually know where it is. It's almost like you can't locate it. It's interdimensionally kind of stuck on Earth, and it can move in and out of dimensions. First depending on how heavy the emotion is, or how much energy they can muster or siphon from their environment. So because they have no actual food source, the body or spirit, they siphon energy from their environment. But when we have these disembodied souls, it's super important to understand that they're exactly like their human self. Exactly. Same beliefs, same fears, same stupidity, same patterns. Like if they were, drunk, sometimes they still act drunk or feel drunk or hang around drunks because they just have
they're aligned with that energy.
Yeah, right. So if they were afraid, like I've had one old lady who didn't want my help because in her religion, in her belief system, ghosts, people like me were bad. Psychics were bad. And I'm like, so you're just going to suffer forever? Like you're dead. You're a ghost in your religion. That's also not great. And, but I just thought it was kind of funny because she refused my help because she didn't believe in people like me. And I was like, all right, well, you can stay there as long as you want, I guess.
I'll check in a couple of years.
Right. So it was it is hilarious in a way, but it can also be very deceiving. And I think that's where a lot of people get misinformation. If you're trying to get facts from, I wouldn't go to some random person on the street and ask them about my soul or my lives or my ex. They're just going to give me some weird advice that's very personal to them and very human. So a lot of readers where they find that they're giving misinformation is that they actually don't know who they're talking to.
Correct.
And they're getting information from usually some of these disembodied souls. But I've had one really interesting story that I have was I was working on a murder case in Boston, and I was scanning the whole entire apartment. Again, I like to go in blind with no information. I didn't even know it was a murder case. I was just going in to clear an apartment that wouldn't sell, right? I was going in to just kind of make it clean.
Sellable.
Yes. Sellable, positive. It had some nasty energy.
So when people walk into an apartment and they're like, it's a nice apartment, but something doesn't feel right.
Well, if you think about it, if somebody was murdered there, you're never going to feel safe. You don't want to bring your family into a place you just don't feel safe.
And people have those experiences.
Right.
They'll go into a park, they'll go to a house, they'll go down an alley, and there's an energy there. They're like, I don't know what that is, but I don't like the way it feels. And you'll see these people buy houses.
Lose hundreds of thousands of dollars on properties over a ghost.
I believe it.
And I think that is so hilarious. Because it's like, I'm way cheaper than that.
And there's
save the money.
There's a whole industry in clearing houses now. And for those who are listening and going, this just seems fucking crazy. Langley, we'll talk about this real quick. The CIA has been using psychic blockers since the fucking 50s. Mm-hmm. And I think you experienced that, right? Where you tried to connect. And
they've called me into cases. So if our own government system is seeking that type of help, then...
Psychic blockers. For those who are wondering, that is the basis of... at least some of the basis of Stranger Things, which has become a fictional phenom. That's exactly what 11 does. And she's a psychic blocker on the other side of that. But this is known.
There's actually technology that can do that the CIA uses. So it's not even a person. It's a type of vibrational frequency and light.
That's created probably from a crystal or material that does the work, yeah?
When I found it, I didn't investigate. I could tell what it was doing. And then I could work around it.
Much more convenient than having to hire people to do it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we'll come back to it. So you're clearing this house. You didn't know anything. You're in Boston. You're walking into this house. You're just told, hey, can you clear this house because I can't sell it? And?
Yeah, I think it was just shitty energy. I don't know if this one is being sold, but I had cleared a whole string of apartments that day. So this was the fourth one. But anyway, I go into the house and I start at the top floor and I work my way downstairs, and all of the ghosts are talking about the dude on the basement, the dude in the basement being violent, being a drug dealer, telling me what he was up to, that he would harass everybody in the building, that they were worried. that they didn't feel safe. And it was really interesting. We go all the way down to the first floor and I meet a woman haunting, and she's an older woman. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And she was like, I'm not telling you. And I was like, well, I'm going to see it anyway. And I'm walking through the house, and there's, so the difference between a ghost and an energetic imprint is you're using two different gift structures. A ghost is conscious. They can speak to you. They have emotions and feelings, and they can keep information from you. But there's this thing called a residual imprint, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you walk into a room and somebody just fought and you feel it and you're like, wow, this is awkward and uncomfortable. That's a residual imprint from the stress or the chaos. We could say
that it's like a negative in old school photographs. Right?
Yeah, well, it's not always negative either.
I don't mean negative like positive, negative. Like in the old school days before digital photographs, we used to have the negatives of the photograph.
Yeah, and if you're really good, you can actually read it. You can see it. You can replay it. You can even hear the argument. It also, there's a positivity to that too, and you use that here, and it's like pumping people up, getting them excited. You leave a positive imprint in a place, and then that continues to get stronger the more you repeat it. So I was walking through the apartment, and this happens a lot during murders or very violent situations where it leaves an energetic imprint. And I saw this situation where I could see her cabinet, her medicine, her cup, her chair. The whole apartment had been stripped down to studs. So like there was no furniture there. So I was just explaining where it was and what I was seeing. And she went in, she took something, she put it in her glass of wine. She went and she laid down. She starts panicking. Her chest starts like getting extreme. She gets up. She starts arguing with her son because her son had drugged her. Okay. And then he gets mad and angry and shoves her. She hit a nightstand, and I could tell where she hit it. And then she went unconscious. And he's pacing up and down the hallway, gets in, picks her up, puts her in her bed, covers her, calls the ambulance.
Makes it look like everything, it was accidental.
Right? So it was in the autopsy. She had marks here, and there was something in her system. She had drugs in her system. She had fentanyl in her system. And so all of it came up in evidence. But she didn't want to tell me. I had to find it.
She was protecting her son.
She sabotaged the evidence.
Interesting.
Because she was haunting. But she was protecting her son. Yeah. She refused to tell me. She didn't want to share it. She didn't want anybody to know. She didn't want him to get in trouble.
Fascinating.
Which is also why he was so fucked up.
So some part of our audience is going, I fucking knew it. Some are like, yeah. And then there's a whole other group that is like, okay, I'm going to turn this one off. I either don't want to know about this stuff or you're full of shit.
So many people are scared of hauntings.
Of course they are.
It's like such a fear factor.
They're afraid of what they either don't understand or can't see. Right? And it seems to be a human design protocol as far as I can tell. When you talk about the Akashic record and there being this ultimate design that keeps getting collapsed and rebuilt, you described Earth as essentially a battery. And then the goal then is to be able to utilize that battery for as long as possible before it resets. We didn't use the word, but I'm going to use it, kind of millennial resets. Like we've been at this for some time. The world has gone through this process a few times at least. Where do you think we are in the cycle compared to other resets? How close are we to either a upgrade or a downgrade, and we're going to run this thing back again?
We're on it. I mean, when you're looking at like billions of years, we are literally on it. The things we do in this lifetime have the potential to
echo through
shift
eternity,
reality forever.
Yeah,
it's a really important lifetime.
And I feel like a lot of people are feeling that, even if they don't know how to put it in words.
Right.
Which is why you're
political stress.
You're seeing a lot of what I would describe as stupidity based on unregulated emotion and fear that is getting expressed verbally through just the inability to translate what is being experienced.
Or even distraction. People running into digital distractions or physical distractions. And, the Bible talks about all of that. When people start drinking, smoking, and like losing touch with themselves, they're looking
Proverbs.
for a distraction.
Right.
They're afraid of what they're actually feeling and conscious of.
So we're close to 8 billion people here. Why are people dropping in right now? And I would say this, do you believe it is a choice of the individual to drop in?
Yes. I have not yet seen a situation where someone was forced to come here unless they signed a contract, which also isn't a force. You know, a lot of people think that incarnating is a contract, and it's not. We have the ability to walk out anytime we want, which a lot of people choose to do. You know,
Death
it is
is a
suicide.
birthright.
They walk out.
Yep.
But the issue with that is usually what happens is it creates so much trauma. You know, obviously you weren't very happy. You weren't very fulfilled. You had a lot of wounds. You had a lot of things you didn't face. Usually is the case for people who do something like that. So usually what happens is you have to come all the way back and redo it. So it's like spirit's like, it's not efficient. And, you know, the person's like, that's not efficient. So it has its negative side effects. But I can't remember the question.
You choose whether or not functionally
whether
we choose.
It's not a contract. You're allowed to leave.
Yeah.
It is very, very rare that someone is on a contract. And it's usually because Earth requires their specialty. And we do have people who are here that Earth requires their specialty. So it's kind of like, I will be of service to humanity and I will get this in return, whether it be like extra support, extra guides, an extra team, people ready to help, you know, like they lead, you know, or command a group of people. They come down with some type of specialized contract, which doesn't look like, I think people want to believe it's all like super special and fun. It's very fucking stressful. You know, like you're you have the weight of humanity on your shoulders, and it's a lot of responsibility. And there is an exchange of energy, but it's still a big responsibility. So it's just very rare.
So we would say then death is a birthright, and it is our ability to leave this plane that allows people to freely choose to come. You don't get stuck here.
Right. There's no actual contract, but karma is real, and karma is not punishment. It is more like a completion of a lesson. So if we are stuck on a pattern or an issue, because we are infinite souls, we don't want to carry that around for literally infinity. So we would come to Earth to get rid of it while Earth is still here.
Right.
A lot of people feel the pressure to kind of come back and close it up or learn it or pay it back or come to closure with that issue.
And I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you think it is wrong, karma is one of the universal laws of at least the first three dimensions, but seems to exist beyond that, is this idea of homeostasis. Everything is trying to get back to balance, and karma is the way of equalizing or homeostasis of a particular energetic profile.
Right. So, you know, especially if you're an infinite being, like you don't want to carry guilt around for 8 million years.
No.
You know, there's no point
Nobody
to
wants
that
to fuck
because
with
it's
that.
just going to weigh on you and create heaviness and distraction from everything else you're trying to do. So we do have this desire to come back into, you know, a place of inner peace or homeostasis.
What does the world need right now? If we're going to not reset this bitch and run it back again, but actually ascend, what does the world need to do? What does humanity need to do? Or to be? I don't want to lay that up in frame that's inaccurate.
I'd say like there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things, but be aware of where you are afraid, because that's always going to lead to misaction. It's always going to lead to making mistakes, and to, you know, any move or decision we make out of fear is always the wrong decision. So if we are functioning in fear, if we are limited by fear, if we're paralyzed by fear, we're not doing anything for anybody. So paying attention to where you're afraid, being more compassionate, not polarizing to an extreme. I know that a lot of people love to do that, you know, and even in politics, it doesn't make sense to polarize to an extreme. We're literally here all for the same mission and the same vision. And I think that anytime you feel an extreme opposite or extreme polarity is going to tell you you're being manipulated somehow, right? So if people could be more conscious of that and realize like, oh, this system or this program or this person is trying to manipulate me to, you know, put so much fear in me that I choose a side, or, you know, to forget what I'm actually doing here.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Weird.
And emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the most powerful tool any of us have under our belt.
Describe emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand when you are projecting your fears or belief systems onto others instead of actually repairing and healing it or taking accountability. So all of us do that. It's very sloppy. and it creates a lot of misinformation and a lot of hurt feelings and definitely derails us the most. So the lack of emotional intelligence is what creates the most misalignment in the realm.
Yeah.
And it's been the hardest thing to master on earth, emotion.
We could say that there is probably a inverted relationship between the degree of fear on the earth and the lack of emotional intelligence.
Right. So, I mean, it's fear is an emotion, and we revert to fear, then you're not listening to anything else. You're not trying to understand it. You're not trying to face it, correct it, resolve it, make peace with it. You're just going to live in it.
If we look at this historically, I'm going to be talking a lot about this over the next year. Humanity is most prone to making the dumbest mistakes when we are in fear.
Fear is energetically divisive. It always will be. So if you scientifically measure someone's physical reaction to a state of fear, everything restricts, right? Muscles tighten up, the blood vessels go to major organs, like everything pulls in, everything restricts, everything internalizes and solidifies. So it's a natural tool of separation and division and self-preservation, and we use that to manipulate people. The world uses it to manipulate people. Because when you are afraid, you are not conscious. You can't be. You're only worried about yourself, right? So there is no, us on the same mission. It is me versus everybody else, which is animalistic. It's not helpful.
And you see this everywhere, unfortunately, but you see this a lot in politics right now on both sides of the fence, right? Fear is a big driver of behavior, and it is really, really easy to manipulate people if you can get them afraid.
And people who are using fear-mongering for any type of political platform are truly not evolved or intelligent
100%.
Because you wouldn't do that if you had emotional intelligence. And I think that there's, I am not one that chooses a political side, but if you wanted to look into what that would look like, a lot of Barack Obama's speeches were very emotionally aware, where he would push a message based on union and
hope,
growth,
love,
and evolution, and not try to bring in fear. He would kind of calm people's fears and give them hope and shove them forward in that trajectory.
One of my favorite speakers of our time.
The two.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you listen to others.
Yeah. Where it's like watching 5-year-olds argue. And
I feel like
shocked.
We're living in high school. This is high school just on the grandest of stages. Social media has just reminded me that most people have not evolved emotionally past high school.
So something about emotional intelligence that I think is really fascinating is that we stop evolving the moment we had a trauma we couldn't overcome.
100%.
So
you're exactly
when you
right.
have someone who reverts to like their 5-year-old self, they've got trauma in their 5-year-old self. So it's like their wounded inner child's on stage yelling at other people. And I think that's helped me in a million ways, because I've been able to realize that,
where to look.
Yeah. Well, also it helps me heal people, right? Like, how old are they? Okay, let's go all the way back to 5-year-old self and work on that. But also to be more compassionate. When there's people out there just like popping off and saying ridiculous things, I see him as a child, and I'm like, aw,
instead of judging,
that poor baby.
Instead of judging, get curious.
Right.
Like, what has happened to you?
Right. So there's no taking it personally. I'm not offended. I'm not, I can't get swept up in the emotion because I just feel bad and I go into like mama bear mode. I'm like, you'll be okay.
It's going to be okay.
The same thing with anger. Anger is the last emotion.
Yep.
That means is that like when somebody is explosive or aggressive, they're hiding other feelings. So the best thing to do is to get that all out and then discover like why you were angry, what you were repressing, where that was coming from, and solving it.
So from a behavioral standpoint, anger is the expression of the perceived loss of something, right? Or that something is being threatened. And so that's when I see somebody get angry, what I'm looking for is, what is their story of loss? What is it they feel is being threatened? And it helps me get to the heart of issues much quicker. You see this again in the political world. I've got many friends on the left and the right. And for the most part, there are some exceptions. They genuinely want the same things. They just believe in a different set of values on how to get there. And then if I'm able to get through the anger and go, well, what is it that you're afraid of? They're generally both afraid of the same thing. Their rights being taken away from them, their freedoms being taken away from them, their inability to express themselves. it's like they both have the same fears. They just have a completely different belief system on how to protect it, which is fascinating to me. And like, where are the intelligent leaders who are healing and bringing people together and pointing this out instead of just ramming divide down people's throats and screaming at each other as if that's going to help all of this?
And we have, even politically speaking, I think about this all the time, that we're using polarizing subjects to trigger division.
Right.
That we're talking about the outcome of something without actually talking about the solution of something. And abortion is a super popular one, right? We're like anti-abortion or for abortion, but how many people are out there using science to say, you know, it's been mathematically and scientifically proven that we have less unwanted or unplanned pregnancies if we do A, B, C, D, and we have all these statistics.
You mean we focus on solutions instead of problems?
We're talking about the polarizing problem because it makes people angry, and they're so furious with anger that they're willing to vote someone instead of just create an actual solution.
Yeah.
And that's just
stupidity.
Yeah, that's insanity.
Yeah.
That's really intense. I would definitely wish or implore people to just look for the actual solution and talk about solutions instead.
Well, we had this horrific situation show up in England. Was it last week, where a kid goes in and stabs a bunch of 7 and 8 year olds in a yoga party. Why did he stab them? Because guns aren't legal in the UK. However, that did not stop the person from killing a bunch of people. He just used a knife instead of a gun, which I'm certainly for certain kinds of gun control. But my point is, our philosophies or our policies in our country are about controlling people and mitigating symptoms, not dealing with the problem.
It's about reactive solutions and not proactive solutions. And that is the same with the medical system. And that's where we're in super danger. We go in after people are diseased and dying, instead of saying, like, these are really great ways to stay healthy, really great ways to not die, really great ways to not get cancer, right? We go into a reactive medical system, which is just pure poison. It's like we're fighting the disease now.
100%. And so then for me, I don't believe there is some set of super geniuses that are creating this to keep people under their thumb and control them. I think this is easier explained by how not intelligent we are as a species yet, that we are overwhelmed by symptoms and not treating problems. So if we really care about people not blowing up buildings, not shooting up a school, not stabbing a fucking girls' yoga group, maybe we start addressing the underlying issue. What is making people want to do this, not controlling their means for doing it? And yet, why is this not being talked about?
Emotional intelligence. You know, that's the interesting thing, is emotional intelligence is fairly new on Earth. And a lot of us are...
It's still theoretical for many.
Yes, think about a lot of, I would say most of my clients have major wounds with their parents, and they're mad at their parents for not knowing what emotions were. Yeah. And it's kind of like, you can't be mad at them for not understanding an emotion. It's
true.
That new. We're really just learning and leaning into what that means. Emotional intelligence is what creates proactive evolution versus reactive evolution, right? Because we understand the problem and we seek a solution for the problem. We're looking at mental repair, our whole system. That is actually why we're working to collapse everything, because the government system, the punishment system, the jail system, they're all reactive.
100%.
And we need proactive.
100%. I'm going to ask you the same question that you just answered, but I want you to reframe this. Why are we as a species seemingly prioritizing reactive versus responsive or proactive behavior? Why is that the path we've chosen?
Well, it was helpful when humans were not evolved enough. I've seen some pretty interesting past lives. I have a very strong theme of working in politics and stuff, even as a soul. And I thought that was really funny, because I'm like, I'm just a psychic. But if you look back at the history of Earth, I mean, every pharaoh had a high priestess, a psychic, a guide. Yep. And that's how we made a lot of these decisions. So I've had a lot of lives like that. And if you think Christians got
out of this, Moses,
it's
David,
everywhere.
They had Nathan, they had Samuel.
Or we had an advisor, we had a priest, or we had someone, right? There's always someone, a prophet. There's always someone to direct humanity somehow, right? So it's a very political
voice of
game.
God, yeah.
And so when I see these lives, it's really interesting that humans were functioning in such animalistic patterns that sometimes you would have to go in and respond to the animal first.
100%.
You'd have to, Spirit explained that you can't force evolution. You need to meet people where they're at. And if they don't understand consciousness, if they don't understand self-preservation, if they're starving, if they're limited, if their resources are scarce, they're going to go into the animalistic mind, and they're going to need someone to understand and respond to that. So that can look very violent and control based, right? It's very control based. It's like very punish heavy, right? They get very heavy on punishment because it controls people. It creates enough pause. The way Spirit explained this one to me, and I thought it was really interesting, that character is built on discipline. Because if we have a thought and we take action immediately, there's no character. We're immediately just doing the thing we think.
It's animal.
So it's the discipline to stop and pause that creates character, because it says, like, this is what I know to be true. I've processed it. I've worked through it. I'm not reacting. I am now an individual. So eventually consciousness does develop in the human, and we now start thinking things through. But at first it looks like punishment, right? So it was necessary and helpful to a degree because we were responding to humans where they were at. And now we're shifting that as people are waking up and evolving, and
more conscious.
We're seeing all the side effects of that too, and obviously it's not working. So we have science backing these side effects, right? That our prison system isn't actually helping people get better.
Weird.
They're coming out even scarier than they went in. So it's not working.
So Maslow, who was a existential psychologist in the 1970s, he's most probably famous for Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Really just outlined what you were talking about. Like, if your base needs aren't met, you'll stay in animal behavior. And once you get out of that, you have the privilege of self-actualizing as you go up that hierarchy of needs.
Right. And we can't force people through it, because even if you gave them all of their basic needs, what happens is they didn't
develop and grow in character.
They didn't develop, so they're abusing.
Which is a problem. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was just talking about this. This is what happens when you give people wealth. Now, I'm not talking about, I think I'm actually becoming a bigger fan of universal basic income, like base living. But like, when people are given something they did not earn, more often than not, it becomes self-destructive. I think 73 or 74% of lottery winners go broke and are worse off 5 years after winning the lottery. How many times do we see sports athletes who get big contracts who go bankrupt, movie stars? It's like because if the path in which you got the money was not developed through character, you do not have the mindset to sustain the resource you own, which is why giving people things is almost never the answer, which isn't me saying that I don't think UBI is a good idea. I think increasingly it is a good idea. But beyond basic needs being met, going back to the animal impulse mitigation, when we give people things they didn't earn, we're not doing them a service, quite the opposite.
It's enabling and making them stuck, right? It's the whole point of the experience is evolution. It's that there is an outcome for the work that I am doing, and I'm getting results. And if there are no outcomes for the work that we are doing, then nobody's doing the work.
How do we help people remember this? It's brilliant.
Emotional intelligence. It all comes back to that's what we're learning right now, and that's what we need to master. So, and the same thing happens with money. If you get money and you're still in your wounds and you still don't think you're worthy of it, and you still have a weird relationship with, being worthy and just receiving in general, you're going to fuck it up. So you're just going to go back to the same pattern. You're just revert to the same pattern. So it is emotional intelligence and understanding that creates the evolution needed to use money productively, or use anything productively, or stop the pattern, whatever the pattern is.
So for me, I have a 3-step process for developing, really becoming more aware, becoming more conscious, and ultimately becoming more emotionally intelligent. And in 3 steps, number 1 is awareness. Becoming aware of the decisions you're making, becoming conscious of your decisions, which is what you were saying when you're saying, like, character is developed by recognizing the thought and then disciplining your behavior through the process of thought. So you're not just acting on impulse, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that's awareness. Awareness, if we can sustain that, leads to honesty, radical honesty about why I'm showing up the way I am. And to the point that you were bringing up, a lot of it is trauma-based, and a lot of it happened before we were 8 years old, which is why we don't remember why we have these wild belief systems. So extreme or radical honesty, which leads to responsibility or radical responsibility for yourself. Response-able. I am able to respond to how I am showing up and make decisions consciously. To me, that is the entire work, is getting people to become aware, honest, and responsible. And unfortunately, it feels like, and hopefully I'm wrong, the pervasive message in our society is it's not your fault. Right? We want to tell them.
There's never a solution in blame. Anytime you're blaming anything, you're giving away your power. It's not, you can't change anything.
Say that one more time, because I want people to hear that. Say it slow. Say it proud. Say it again.
Anytime you blame anyone for anything, you're giving away your power.
Yeah.
Right? You're saying, I'm not in control of this situation. This person has control over me, over the way I behave, over the way I act or respond.
And so if somebody believes they are powerless, how would you expect someone who believes they're powerless to act? What pervasive emotions and behaviors would show up?
Well, there's just a lot of projection, a lot of blame, a lot of feeling disempowered, a lot of feeling victimized, and there's no growth in that either.
Would you
can't
say
be victim and you can't be a victim and victor at the same time, right? We can't be like a hero of our own experience while also being a victim.
Do you think there would be lots of fear or little fear for somebody who lives that way?
Lots of fear. And I always point out, because I know this triggers a lot of people, but I always point out that I have been, this comes up all the time. I have been in extreme abusive situations most of my life, right? 25 years of my life. And none of it changed until I was ready to say, how am I participating in this?
Ooh.
And it wasn't, like I said, just mental, physical, emotional, sexual abuse. And none of it changed until I said, what's my pattern with this? What are my belief systems with this? How do I shift this? How do I become aware of this? How do I take accountability? How do I stop blaming? And I was able to break those patterns because of it. A lot of people come into that statement and think like, well, I was abused. I was hurt, right? I was victimized. And they get mad that you would say something like that. But it's like, if that's working for you, go for it. Nobody's forcing you to change that belief system, but it did not work for me.
And when they show up that way, normally, I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, they tend to feel very empowered. They tend to live in love. They tend to have a lot of peace.
I like to think I am a very peaceful person. I actually had an interview the other day, and I thought it was really beautiful that she said that I wasn't wearing my trauma, right? That she forgets that I've been through all of these horrible, terrible things because I don't wear it. And she felt so bad, and she was apologizing. And I was like, I think that's the greatest compliment, because I've been through some really horrific things. And just the fact that I'm showing up with, love, and you feel safe around me, and you're not worried about hurting my feelings or worried about me being wounded. It was like, that's exactly what I've been working for my whole life.
100%.
Right. So it's like the evidence is there.
So, and I was being facetious, of course, or joking. It was when somebody wears their trauma, when they insist on being a victim and they want to use the big I, this happened to me, this happened to me. I've yet to run into a person who shows up that way, that shows up in love, has peace in their heart, has joy, and is happy.
Right.
And you can't force somebody out of that identity if they want to live in it. But I'm like, you're miserable. It's obvious that you're miserable.
And they pull in misery and they create
and they
it.
keep
and
attracting
it almost feels like they have
more
bad
of it.
luck.
Right.
And it's really sad to see it collapse around them. And it's like you're creating this reality.
Yes.
You have control of that. You're the artist of your masterpiece, and that's the type of masterpiece you're creating.
One of my reminders that goes off on my phone every day as a constant reminder is, how am I complicit in creating the reality I say I don't want? How do I make sure that I'm always taking radical responsibility for the result I'm getting in my life? Because what I've learned, and I love your take on this, if you stay victim long enough, you will become the perpetrator. Mm-hmm. Right? If you don't get out of victimhood, you will eventually justify being the perpetrator.
We are naturally conductors of energy. And we see that when we're healing our past, our wounds. We repeat the pattern until we heal and clear the pattern, right? We are conducting a pattern. So we absolutely, a victim will become a villain in time, because and we see it all this time where people project things onto their relationship, and it's something like, this upsets me, so I'm very angry and upset when you do it, right? So like they put their triggers on their partner.
That which you judge judges you back.
It's almost like I am super, super jealous because I'm insecure because a whole bunch of people cheated on me. So I'm going to watch what you do. I'm going to track your phone. I'm going to get mad every time you talk to a girl, and that's your fault, right? When that's a pure projection of a wound. So that's controlling. That's abuse.
Yep.
If you don't trust someone to respect your relationship boundaries, then you are now the controlling abuser, right? You're projecting the wound instead of healing the wound. So it's very easy to become the villain in, that kind of story. And if you're not aware.
Well, I just read, I think Chris Will posted this, and I hope I got the stat right, but you can look at his post to verify the stat. But it was like on campuses, school campuses, college campuses right now, I believe the number, correct me if I'm wrong, social media, I believe the number was 41% of students believed that violence was justified if you were offended by what somebody said.
Sounds right. Sounds right for the general population.
Well, I mean,
it's shocking, but I believe it.
I'd like to pull it up to make sure I got the number right, but I believe that was the number. And I'm like, that's the world we're living in right now. Why? If you stay victim long enough, you will become perpetrator. So I'd love to get your take on this. Why have we gotten to a point? There used to be an old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And it's an old child adage, but there's some truth to it. And now we've gotten to a point where we want to cancel, banish, and incarcerate people who say things that offend us. How in the fuck did we allow that? And very often, I would say that's
like the millennial curse.
And I'm doing my best.
And I am a millennial, so I can say that.
I'm doing my best to not attack a particular party here, but I would say in the 80s and 90s, the Democratic Party was the one trumpeting free speech and the freedom to express yourself and be you. That is not the party that is advocating that now. Now they're saying, hey, if what you say isn't in line with what we believe, we're going to call it disinformation and saying what you're saying is not true, and you should be incarcerated or held liable for what you were saying. Has anybody read Orson Welles or Aldous Huxley or any of this dystopian worlds?
Right. I think
why is this happening in your opinion?
So every shift, every change, every phase of evolution has positive and negative side effects. We are, like I said earlier, working to master emotional intelligence, which means that we are hyper aware of how people make us feel. Right. So that's where the obsession with triggers comes in, the obsession with boundaries and
Brilliant.
pronouns and all of these things comes in, because we are trying to figure it out. But most of the world is, again, still in reactive, trying to transition to proactive and just being reactive instead of, diving deeper and understanding it. So it is the same shift that is creating emotional intelligence, but right now it's still in its reactive stage, which is the
brilliant answer.
So it has a purpose, it has a point, and it is helpful. But I do say it's like the millennial curse, because the millennials seem to be the ones that are all like, my wounds, like we're all obsessed with the wounds. So much so that we forget to actually do the work. It's to recognize the wound and go in and dive and clear it and understand it. And it is our gift, but also our curse. And we keep getting trapped in the cursed aspect of it, where now we're just canceling everybody and getting really reactive.
Because that's going to make everything better.
Right. And again, that's the control part, because you don't understand how to get the results you want. You want to control people who are doing the thing you don't like.
Brilliant.
So emotional intelligence is controlling ourselves, which is the only thing we really can control.
What a wonderful answer. And I agree with you. I think that's 100% it. It's getting back to recognizing the only thing we can control is us. And that's, for me, I think why this all kind of feels like high school. What happens in high school, you've got an insane amount of hormones moving through your body that you're not used to, and it amplifies everything in your feels. And so people are way more dramatic, way more, everything is, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. It's like what you're describing feels like high school, because we're waking up to becoming more emotionally aware, intelligent beings, and we're amplifying all of those feels again. So we're getting hyper offended by things people are saying. You can't control what other people say, but you absolutely can control you.
Right. And part of that hypersensitivity is also by design intuition picking up, which is where the hypersensitivity comes in. And this is exactly why you cannot master your gifts without mastering your trauma. right? Because then you're just
dropping bombs
incredibly
today.
triggered all the time, and you get a lot of misinformation, and you let yourself be manipulated now on multiple dimensions. Now you're being manipulated by other entities and beings and making bad decisions. So it is by design necessary, but I think it's important for people to understand that, because as you know, understanding this myself, I would never take advice from anybody who's super emotional or reactive, right? I would never, just never going to be a good thing to do. But there are people who are hiring readers who are super emotional and reactive and haven't healed their shit. What do you think they're going to give you? Again, a conduction of what they're experiencing, the pain, the torment, the feeling stuck, the not understanding, you know, how to get out of their own shit. So you're literally buying what you see, and I think that's really important for people to consider.
Who you get advice from matters. Yeah, maybe you want to look for people who are emotionally intelligent and a little bit more grounded.
Right.
So
they won't let their emotions sway the message.
So what advice would you give to people that are like, fuck, that's me. I'm emotionally reactive. I'm hypersensitive. What people say pisses me off. I find myself pointing the finger out. How do you help this person?
You know, it's funny because I always hear people be like, oh shit, I'm so fucked up. You know, I'm not perfect. And I'm like, nobody is. And that's a whole illness in itself. You know, if you think 100%. You're perfect, then you've got another
set of situations.
There's a whole other issue we need to face there. The idea is, you know, the way I address every day is to be the best version of myself. And then when I am reactive and I do make a mistake, I take time away. It's really important to separate yourself from the situation, create space there, and then to take time to understand, why was I so reactive? What was I experiencing? Where did that come from? Why was that so aggressive or intense? And what did I think I was going to get out of that? And how would I go about that differently, right? And then I just kind of, you evaluate it, and then you come back to it and you say sorry when needed. But I would say correct the behavior. I think that's so important. We have to actively correct the behavior. We have way too many people being reactive and then walking away and just getting mad and never actually clearing it or understanding it or correcting it, right? Or just apologizing but never actually correcting it. So it is important to follow the system all the way through, right? I can't just apologize the same time for the same issue. I need to stop doing it. So how am I going to do it? I have to follow through.
So somebody is super reactive, hypersensitive in the moment. They feel like they're going to react. What process or routine could you give them to slow down?
Leave first. You need to separate yourself from the situation, right? You can't do shit when you're in defense mode. When you immediately feel that reactiveness and that overwhelming emotion, you need to find a quiet place to ground, to connect, to be at peace, to breathe, to kind of recalibrate who you are, get out of the emotion, right? To create distance there. If you can't, it might be something like headphones or like, you know, turning your head or breathing it through or giving it space or not reacting out of emotion. And then doing that later where you have time to journal or think it through or understand it. And I think more people need to like normalize saying, I don't want to respond to this right now because I need to think it through. We are so used to like an instant text, a quick fix, like a direct response that we feel pressure to respond to something sometimes that it would be better if we just said, give this time. I don't need to respond to this right now. I need time to sleep on it, to think it through, to understand what I'm feeling. So distance helps. Emotions don't actually last very long, especially when you've removed the trigger. So walk away from the trigger, figure it out, think it through, and then decide, are you still really angry about that? And the really fascinating thing is that if you are still angry about something, it never has anything to do with them, ever. And if you get really good at that, you unravel a whole bunch of ways in which people control you emotionally and mentally because you've allowed it.
Yes.
It's never about them. If you've got a strong emotional reaction, that's yours. You programmed that, right? Something happened. Ooh. So that's like really the secret sauce is when you heal that, you realize that you don't need anything else outside of you. You don't need closure. You don't need to have that discussion again. You don't need to go to that again. You don't get triggered by the same thing again. You figured it out.
Brilliant. Jessenia, where can people find you?
Soul Architect Jessenia on social media.
Who's somebody that you could help? I mean, I think you can help everyone, but I mean, who are the people that you work with the most right now?
I think anyone trying to figure out what's going on just with themselves or spirit or the earth. Anyone who's ready to do the work.
And you released your book a couple years ago now, Creation. People can get that on Amazon. Who would that be good for? Who would you recommend that book to?
The very rare few people who don't get overwhelmed easily. It's a very overwhelming book.
It is pretty dense.
It is.
Yeah.
Creation is dense.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, it's very overwhelming. I do have a book I put out, I think it was like 8 years ago, and I put it out for a class. So we are currently redoing it, and that's what I would say is like level 1, and it's just spiritual development.
It's
so
called
that's
spiritual
level
development.
1 book. Yeah, it's a lot easier to understand.
Very cool. I appreciate you coming on today. Look forward to our next episode.
Thank you.